there. So, what's something you see in our community? What's one thing that you see, Caleb? Love? Okay. So let's draw a heart in this community. What's something else that you see?
People.
People. Not just one person, but lots of people. So let's draw lots of people. You can't have a community with just one person, right? It takes a group. What else do you see? How about a space? There's this building. It's our property. We have the community garden, the library, schools, neighbors. So let's just draw a building for right now. Okay, Caleb, did you have one?
Smiles.
Smiles, okay. And any other emotions we might see? You can just list any emotion. They're all accepted. Maybe confusion?
I do.
Do you have another emotion you want to say? Or a feeling?
Yeah.
No? Yeah? Okay, let's do confusion. We'll do it. Confusion. And so if someone's confused and someone else is happy, maybe there can be some connection between the two and there could be some support. This person could tell that person, hey, this is what's going on right now. So now you know and you don't have to be confused anymore. So connection. Maybe they'll be holding hands. And a smile. Okay, what else is in a community? I just heard friendship. And me? Okay. So these guys are all friends. So let's do a big heart around them. So just to list off some other things that I can think of. Oh, go ahead. So Phoebe put a cross at the top of that building. Is that a church? Okay. So churches are part of our community. And schools, so learning. Would anyone else like to draw something on the front of this? Go ahead, you can come around. Here's a marker. So Phoebe, what are you drawing right now? A book and a person reading it. And Tobias, what are you about to draw?
The kitchen.
The kitchen, so food, sharing meals and cooking together. Okay, what else?
I'm just gonna draw UU night. I'm just gonna write UU night. I'm gonna draw a kitchen.
Okay, so UU night, our community potluck night, and a kitchen. And anything you wanted to draw, Caleb? Okay, so if anyone is interested in making this window come to life with some paint downstairs, you're welcome to join us. And anyone at the end of the service that would like to see our community in completion, you're welcome to come downstairs and say hello.
Our centering words this morning come from Brian Piergrossi, and it's called A Spiritual Conspiracy. On the surface of the world right now, there is war and violence, and things seem dark. But calmly and quietly, at the same time, something else is happening underground. An inner revolution is taking place, and certain individuals are being called to a higher light. It is a silent revolution, from the inside out, from the ground up. This is a global operation, a spiritual conspiracy. There are sleeper cells in every nation on the planet. You won't see us on the TV. You won't read about us in the newspaper. You won't hear about us on the radio. We don't seek any glory. We don't wear any uniform. We come in all shapes and sizes, colors and styles. Most of us work anonymously. We are quietly working behind the scenes in every country and culture of the world. Cities big and small, mountains and valleys, in farms and villages, tribes and remote islands, you could pass by one of us on the street and not even notice. We go undercover. We remain behind the scenes. It is of no concern to us who takes the final credit, but simply that the work gets done. Occasionally, we spot each other in the street. We give a quiet nod and continue on our way. During the day, many of us pretend we have normal jobs, but behind the false storefront at night is where the real work takes place. Some call us the conscious army. We are slowly creating a new world with the power of our minds and hearts. We follow with passion and joy. Our orders come from the central spiritual intelligence. We are dropping soft, secret love bombs when no one is looking. Poems, hugs, music, photography, movies, kind words, smiles, meditation and prayer, dance, social activism, website blogs, random acts of kindness, releasing grudges, letting go of judgments. We each express ourselves in our own unique way with our own unique gifts and talents. Be the change you want to see in the world. That is the motto that fills our hearts. We know it is the only way real transformation takes place. We know that quietly and humbly we have the power of all the oceans combined. Our work is slow and meticulous. Like the formation of mountains, it is not even visible at first glance, and yet with its entire tectonic plates shall be moved in the centuries to come. Love is the new religion of the 21st century. You don't have to be highly educated or have any exceptional knowledge to understand it. It comes from the intelligence of the heart embedded in timeless, evolutionary pulse of all human beings. Be the change you want to see in the world. Nobody else can do it for you. We are now recruiting. Perhaps you will join us, or already have. All are welcome. The door is open. Our special music this day is from Angie, From a Distance.
From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. It's the voice of hope, it's the voice of peace, it's the voice of every man. From a distance we all have enough, and no one is in need. From a distance there are no guns, no bombs, and no disease, no hungry mouths to feed. From a distance we are instruments, marching in a common band, playing songs of hope, playing songs of peace. They're the songs of every man. God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance. God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance. From a distance you look like my friend, even though we are at war. From a distance I cannot comprehend what all this fighting's for. From a distance there is harmony, and it echoes through the land. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves, it's the heart of every man. It's the hope of hopes, it's the love of loves. This is the song for every man. God is watching us, God is watching us, God is watching us from a distance. And God is watching us, God is watching, God is watching us from a distance.
This community of care is created through our work and our time together, our commitment to one another. This is our covenant, to walk together in loving fellowship, to share our hopes and values. As we pass these baskets, we thank you for your generous gifts which support the work of this religious community and Unitarian Universalism in the world at large. As a reflection of our values, we're pleased to participate in the Change for Change program. The coins you place in the basket today will support the work of nonprofits in and around the Grand Valley, and will now receive today's offering. This congregation is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to its life, we affirm our lives within it. And now let's sing together hymn number 317 in the gray hymnal, We Are Not Our Own.
Let me warn you. This is your minister, once again, choosing a hymn by the lyrics, not the music. But Joanna, our music director, said that we can probably handle it. But she suggested that Janet plays the whole thing through once so we can listen to the melody. And this is going to be kind of a new thing this year that we're going to start learning some new hymns, but I'll try to choose them when Joanna's actually here to teach us. So listen through it for the first time, and then we'll open our voices in joy, however that sounds. I have to say, I think I am going to like that hymn when we learn how to sing it. I think it has beautiful words. So today, we're talking about community and connection. And, you know, really when you think about community and connection, there's two ways that you can look at it. And Angie's song, you know, talks about that too from a distance. There's the macro when we're looking out at the world and the larger community of who we are on that global, cosmic, macro sense. And then there's that micro perspective of who are we in our own individual lives, and where are the connections in our own lives. And today, I want us to talk a little bit about both of those and how, really, if you think about it, I love the phrase layers of connection, because that's what Maya was talking about today with the kids. When you look through that window, you see one thing. But then when you start looking closer, then they added the people, and then they added the kitchen, and they added the church. But then they started to add the friendships and the relationships, and then they started to add the emotions and the confusion and the laughter and the sadness and the joy. And those are all different layers of connection. But I think, if you think about it, one of my questions in this sermon that I was thinking about writing today is, what is belonging? And how do we know if we belong? And I think belonging comes with connection. And those layers of connection, as they deepen, we begin to belong more. And I was thinking about that this morning, just the experience perhaps of walking into this building, this church or this congregation, whatever we want to call it, and the different layers of connection that come with that, right? So if you are a visitor or guest and you're walking into this space for the first time, the very first layers that you're probably going to take notice of is, what's going on outside of this building? What is going on in the parking lot? What is that blessing box? What is that rainbow flag? What are the people inside the building? What are they really like? And when I was driving up this morning, I saw two people talking, and I saw smiles. So it looked to me from that kind of back layer of connection that there was some friendliness and happiness going on. That's one layer of connection. And then you walk in, and perhaps, hopefully, you get a warm welcome and a smile and somebody introducing themselves saying, "Welcome, this is who I am. Who are you?" And that's another layer of connection. And then you come in and we have our welcoming words. And what do those welcoming words mean to you? And what does the music mean to you, sung beautifully by Angie? And, backed up a little bit from the minister, I've been told that sometimes Trent mutes me when I'm singing. That's another level of connection. And that is, just for people who are here for the first time, right? But then when you start to come and you check out a UU night, or you come to a building your own theology class, then there's that second kind of level of connection of, now I'm getting to know the people a little bit better, and what do we really believe, and what do we really stand for, and who are we when things are going really, really well, and who are we when things aren't going so well? And do I still feel like I belong? Do I belong when I'm having a really good day, but do I also then still feel like I belong when I'm not having a great day? And that's a whole nother layer of connection. And then it goes a little bit deeper, and some of us have been here for a year or two, and at some point somebody may come up to you and say, "Do you want to get involved? Would you like to be part of leadership, or would you like to join a team, or Maya's putting on this alternative healing fair and we need some help in some capacity. And once again, that's a deeper level of connection. And that happens in this little faith community, but I think it's important to think about how does that happen in our own lives outside of this little faith community. What are those layers of connection in your own lives? With the layers of connections that you might or might not have with neighbors. You know, we have a couple, it looks like they're moving into the house on the corner. Right now, that level of connection is, for me, oh, I see a U-Haul truck coming and going, and Danny and I being a little bit nosy, and like, is that stuff coming out of the truck or is it going into the truck, right? So that's like one kind of distant level of connection. But then sometimes something happens, like your ferret gets out and goes through their dog door, right? And then that's like a second level of connection when they're knocking on the door and saying, do you have a ferret? Well, yeah, we do. Thank you for not letting your dog eat it. But then there's a little bit of laughter, there's a little bit of familiarity, and it's kind of another layer of connection. And then maybe down the road something happens and you see that there's an emergency vehicle in your neighborhood. And because now you've kind of lurked and you've joked a little bit with them about a runaway ferret, then is there enough of that layer to be able to go over and say, hey, are you doing okay? How are you? Is there anything that you need? And that's, once again, another layer of connection. And those layers just keep coming off, and they come off, and they come off, and they go a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper until hopefully one day you have those people or those communities in your life where you feel so much like you belong that you can call somebody. Maybe it's your minister, maybe it's just another congregant, maybe it's your neighbor, but you've gotten to that place where you can say, I'm really not okay right now. I really am struggling. I need some help. I need some safety. I need some security. I need some unconditional love or whatever. And then once again, we go into that deeper level of connection. And I think that that's kind of what Maya is going to be talking about with the kids today, and that's what I think Angie's beautiful music was about. That from a distance, we see it one way, and as we get closer and closer and closer, we start to see it in another way. And it actually, if you think about it, this to me is kind of interesting, right? From a distance, everything is blue and beautiful, and it looks really beautiful, you know, from that kind of cosmic space distance. The Earth is just this beautiful spinning planet. And then you start to get a little bit closer, and wait, everything's not perfect. There's war, and there's hunger, and people are being cruel. And so then you think, no, there's not connection here. What is this, right? But if you keep going, right, you get even closer. All of a sudden, that person that you think is your enemy, you make eye contact with, and you see in that other human being that connection. That young man right there with that gun reminds me of my child. I see my child in this perceived enemy. And the connection deepens. Or you begin to see, you know what? In that other person who I thought was my enemy, or who I just screamed at, as Maya said, I'm looking in their eyes right now and I'm seeing fear, or I'm seeing anxiety, or I'm seeing sadness, or I'm seeing compassion. And all of a sudden, it's back to that beautiful divine connection that we could see from a distance. And then from one perspective, it doesn't look so connected, but then when we go into the micro again, we realize once again how connected we really are. And I just invite us to really think about that today. Here in this UUCGV community, after church, the leadership is gonna, for those of you that aren't aware, the church year for some reason goes from July to July, so we have a new leadership slate and we haven't worked together yet. So we're gonna have lunch together after church today and make some of those connections, right? But how do we also do that in our own lives? And are there places that you feel the connection and then you go towards that connection and then you get to start to see the real person and you're like, ew, no, that person's actually kind of annoying, right? But then it's like, okay, does that make me back up and say I don't want to be part of that? Or then you keep moving forward and say, okay, this is one surface level. I'm going to continue forward until I get into that place of where I recognize this human being on a soul-to-soul level again. And that is really what I invite us to think about. I was thinking about this sermon today, and I had it kind of written down, and I was like, I don't know, do I like what I've written? And so I got here to church, and I grabbed my purse, and I realized that I had left my computer bag at home at 9:45, and there was this, it wasn't really even panic, because it was like, I don't actually need this computer and this sermon to say what I want to say, because as I was driving here, what I realized that my favorite part of Sunday is this, not right necessarily preaching, but when I get to look out at everybody and just look at you. And it's the people that are here that make this community. It's not necessarily my words or a great sermon or an intellectual exercise. It's being able to look out and make eye contact with everybody and know that I genuinely value every person here. And I realized this morning I could probably do a sermon around that without having to have that security of a pre-written words. And then I realized that Trent needed my computer for Zoom. So I got back in my car and drove back home and had my computer here. But what I think is that because I have been here for 10 years now, that level of connection, those layers that come off, are to the point that I can actually forget to bring my sermon with me and not panic. Because I know this congregation well enough to know that it's really going to be all okay, because we've moved from that distance to the awkwardness, then to actually really getting to see and know each other on that deeper level. And that, I think, is what really matters, and I think that's what makes a faith community. And when everything shut down for COVID, this congregation really, I think, stayed connected really, really well. But I think one of the reasons that we were able to do that was because we kept, during COVID, when we were all virtual, we kept the Zoom going and we made it real, and we talked to each other via Zoom. There were other churches that still came and put on a really good service and recorded it, and then they sent out a link for people to watch on their own. But I think that what was not unique, because we're not the only ones that did it, but I think what worked for us was that we never did it perfectly, and we still don't do it perfectly with the technology and everything, but what was more important to us was that connection. And I think it was Debbie the other day that we were talking, and she was saying one of those Zoom meetings that we had early on, we realized we can't sing together, because like I forgot to mute everybody, and then everybody was like singing on Zoom, but the internet is all at different times, and so I think it hurt everybody's ears. But it wasn't about perfect music, it was about perfect connection. And it's not even perfect connection, because no connection is ever perfect, because it can't be perfect because we're not perfect. So maybe it's about not perfect connection, but real connection. And that's important, I think, is how do we connect? And it happens in relationships, it happens with families, but even I was having a conversation today, this week, about, you know, the integration of like holistic healing and what is happening in our own bodies. And the connection, one of our congregants sent me a really wonderful article about the connection between hearing aids and cognition. And people, the studies are showing that even if you don't have hearing loss, that hearing aids can help people with their mental capacity stay alert if you get the hearing aids early enough. Because what's happening is that as you begin to lose your hearing, the connections around other people, obviously you can't hear as well, you're not part of the conversations, but even when you can hear, studies are showing that the hearing aids keep the brain firing in the entire capacity. And so those connections in the synapses in the brain are firing on a healthier level with that extra boost for being able to hear. And I just thought that was such a great, I didn't know that, but I want to share that because I think that's really important for those of us as we are aging to know that think about getting your hearing tested. Think about adding some hearing aids, even if you think that you can hear, because it's helping our brain. And that I think is what I'm hoping with the spiritual conspiracy that I read about earlier, is that we as human beings are beginning to really take more of an integrative, holistic look at everything. Even the holistic, organic structure of our bodies, and realizing that we're not just these individual parts that Western medicine has dissected for centuries, and that was needed so that the doctors and the scientists can figure out how we work. But then what has gotten lost and maybe is coming back together is we can look at the individual parts, but then you can't forget to look at how that encompasses the whole. And that, I hope, this is my optimism, is where we're moving as a humanity. That we got really good at dissecting the parts, but then we felt disconnected because each one of our parts, it wasn't a collective whole. And now, even as scientists study our bodies as a holistic approach, we can begin to study our own lives as a holistic approach. So if we're feeling somewhat depressed or isolated or lonely, Not all of us have the exact family that we would wish for, but that doesn't mean that we can't have the connections with other people in other ways. Not everybody has the marriage that they want, but you can still connect with your girlfriends and your boyfriends outside of that. You can still connect with book studies, and you can bring in that holistic whole. You might have the best family in the world, but you're feeling disconnected because you don't know your neighbors. And part of connection is being part of that community and knowing that neighborhood. And a few years ago, I was driving home about 8 o'clock at night, and there were about 10 kids outside in the middle of the street playing football. And it made me really sad because it reminded me of what my childhood was like. And that's what we did in my neighborhood. We knew our neighbors. We would go outside and play games, and we had these like huge games of hide and go seek that took neighborhoods. The kids from all over the neighborhood, we'd have these huge games of hide and go seek, and we all knew that we had to go home when the streetlights went on. And my kids didn't really have that. My kids didn't have the everybody walk to the same school together and everybody walk home from the same school together. Now we're all in our minivans or our cars, and the parents pull up and drop the kids off and pull up and pick them up at the end of the day, and it's kind of disconnected. But it doesn't have to be. And so that's my invitation for today, is how do we start to build those connections again? When Danny was in about first or second grade, she played soccer over at Long's Park, and that's where they had their soccer practices. And she liked soccer, but her favorite part of soccer practice was after soccer practice, there was this woman who would show up with a big boom box, and right there in the playground area, she would hit play and she would start playing Zumba music, and she would start dancing, and the community showed up and just did like free Zumba classes because this one lady was just up there doing it, and Danny and her friend Abby were like right there with that, like dancing. And it was beautiful. And I think that is how we're going to address the loneliness, the isolation, and the depression in the world, really. I think we all think we need to be doing it individually on our own, and I don't think any of us are going to get out of our own hole if we don't have other people to help pull us out, lift us up, and then keep us up. And that's a big topic, it's a big conversation, but I at least want us to start thinking about that today. What are the levels of connection in your own life? How can you deepen them? Things look good, and then you get closer, and they get tricky, but if you move through the trickiness, you get connected again. And so don't forget about that either, because we live in a day and age where you can get offended by somebody and you can just block them, or you can just shut them out of your social media or out of your life, and then there's this disconnect and you think you may have won. But if we could get through that kind of layer of whatever this social media thing is called these days, and we get through that, then maybe we can start to see each other again. And hopefully what our leadership and what everybody here in the sanctuary today can start thinking about is how can this little faith community be a big part of that in this valley? How do we help to bridge those layers of connection? And I believe that next week the topic is going to be about the bridge. So with that, I'm going to let us just sit with that as we sing one of my favorite hymns, Come Sing a Song With Me, and we don't even need Joanna for this one because I think we know this one pretty well. Number 346. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.